And for some political analysis, we're joined now by CBS News Chief Election and Campaign Correspondent Robert Costa and CBS News Senior White House and Political Correspondent Ed O'Keefe. Good to have you both here.
See you.
Robert Costa, you had a key interview with Kevin McCarthy, the former Speaker of the House, and he has announced he's stepping away. This is going to make the GOP slim margin even skinnier. I want to play a portion of your interview here.
Speaker Johnson, so far, is he a deer in the headlights or doing a decent job?
This is a very hard job. You know, if I was the best to give advice, I'd still be in it. And to be fair to Speaker Johnson, he didn't have the years before to plan. He wasn't the majority leader. He wasn't the minority leader. He's doing fine. And it's like anything else, 10,000 hours, you improve at your job. I think the best advice I could give to him, you're the Speaker of the House. Do not govern in the idea that you're afraid somebody's going to make a motion to vacate. When I made the decision to pay our troops and not shut down, I knew they were going to make a motion to vacate on me. I didn't even know the Democrats would go along with it. But what I did know is I had been in that room before. I had watched what has failed. And I knew at that moment that when I thought before I ran for office, you'd always tell yourself, would you do what you think was right? Would you literally risk your job and do it? You say you would, but when you came to that moment, I hope history writes that I actually did what I said I would do before I ever got elected when that moment came. And I would do it all again because I hope others would look at that and do the exact same thing. It was right.
He's passionate there. But what he's putting his finger on is that question of, can Mike Johnson govern and, by the way, work with Democrats?
Former Speaker McCarthy's comment there is so revealing. Publicly, he's saying he believes the new Speaker, Mike Johnson, is doing just fine. But based on my reporting, my conversations with other House Republicans, key insiders in Washington, they say Speaker Johnson has political capital with House Republicans. He's popular with conservatives in the House, but he doesn't have political capital in Washington, just as he needs to probably cut a deal with President Biden, as you've been discussing with your guests on Ukraine, on Israel. He's moving forward with an impeachment process inside of the House of Representatives, of course, testing his relationship with the president at this crucial time. He doesn't have much of a relationship with Leader McConnell, the minority leader in the U.S. Senate. Senate Republicans keeping the House out of those discussions over immigration with Senator Langford and others. The question looming over the new speaker is, how is he going to address Israel, Ukraine, government funding early next year? And he doesn't have answers at this point because he's still settling into the job.
And he has a January 19th shutdown deadline hanging over his head. I mean, Ed, we've been talking about this all throughout the program. Does the White House need to step in here and close a deal on the border? Do they want to?
They would like to. The president certainly would like to come up with something. He knows there'll be some pain to pay with certain elements of the Democratic Party, but deal making is his thing, especially if it's a bipartisan deal, even if it could be ugly. But yes, they've got to try to get something done on this, if only to sort of go into an election year and say, I'm addressing what is now, the second most important or urgent issue to voters, and demonstrate that you can do something. Whether he picks up the phone himself this week and starts getting into the details remains to be seen. If we see more active engagement from the chief of staff, from others around the president doing this, that's a sign that they're getting closer. But he, remember, got burned a lot, spending too much time on legislative details in the beginning. So he's spent most of this year backing off, saying, leave it to Congress. That also allows him to blame Congress for the inaction. We'll see now in the coming days if he jumps in.
You know, another thing we saw in our polling that Anthony shared was that Americans are disapproving of the president's handling of this crisis in Israel. I know you went out to that key state of Michigan to report on what voters there are thinking.
Yeah.
What did you learn on the ground?
So important, as Anthony pointed out earlier, the war is not necessarily the biggest issue of concern, but it is in parts of Michigan, Dearborn, Michigan especially, largest concentration of Arab American voters in that critical swing state who look at what's happened over the last 60 days and say, I can't vote for him. He's allowed my relatives or my friends' relatives or my friends' neighbors to get killed. how can we possibly support somebody who's allowed so much civilian death? These are people who campaigned against Donald Trump 4 years in 2016 and in 2020, voted for Biden in 2020 because they knew he was a better option. They look at the two of them now, if that is your option next November, and say, well, just skip that. Why that matters? Small but influential group of voters inside a big county, inside a big swing state, that Joe Biden needs to win, that Donald Trump wants to win back.
Right.
If you start losing those small groups when these elections are being won on the margins, you're in real trouble.
Exactly. And we're going to continue to watch that. I know you are, Ed. Robert Costa, before I let you go, the former president, is walking into a courtroom tomorrow with this New York civil fraud case. How much are these legal complications impacting his thinking?
I'll be there in New York, sitting behind him. I've sat behind him in court before in this civil fraud trial.
What's that like?
It's revealing. You're seeing his silhouette in front of you, kind of bobbing and weaving in frustration because he can't stand this judge in the civil fraud case. What an American scene to see a former president sitting in a courtroom while he's also the Republican frontrunner. And this trial, more than anything, I'm told by his allies, frustrates him. He talks more in private, I'm told, about the civil fraud trial than his own Republican rivals, who had a debate a few days ago that many Republicans seem to shrug off. At this point, it looks like, as McCarthy told me, Trump is going to be the nominee unless former Ambassador Haley or Governor DeSantis or Governor Christie really start to pick up momentum. And it seems like the party, based on my conversations with party leaders, are starting to just come around to that fact, even though Trump might wrap up the nomination next year, just as he begins a federal trial over January 6th.
We're going to have to leave it there, but we have plenty more to talk to you about, and I know we will in the weeks and months ahead.